Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. I can only imagine someone angrily yelling into a phone while you calmly reply, "I told you this would happen, you didn't listen, you made your bed," over and over. More details in our first story. So don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Real estate wants perfectly cut grass. Okay. Where I live in Central Coast QLD, the wet season is up and down. Sometimes it's dry and other times it floods. I also happen to live in a swampy area, so even a small amount of rain leaves most of the ground soggy. My partner and I have been in the rental for 6 months with wet season turned on, full force of rain for weeks. I couldn't walk through the backyard because I'd sink. The front yard wasn't so bad, thankfully. I was able to somewhat maintain the front lawn, keeping the grass looking good and hedges trimmed. I thought I could leave the backyard and pay for someone to do it once the ground dried up, but the real estate agent did not like it at all. In my lease, it said that the ground could not be left marked upon exiting the premises, so I didn't even park my car on the grass ever. The real estate agent must have taken a peek and seen the just past ankle-length grass and emailed me, furious about how I needed to trim it. I tried explaining that the ground was too wet and I or anyone else wouldn't be able to push a mower through it. Real estate agent: "I don't care if you say the ground is wet and you can't push a mower. Hire a ride-on and cut the damn grass." There was some back and forth with me trying to explain the ground and sinking situation, but REA was having none of it. So I booked someone to come do the backyard on a ride-on. As expected, the ride-on left trenches and it completely ruined the grass. I'm not talking little marks through the grass, I'm talking someone could have used the trenches to do a flip on a bike. The grass was squashed, the mud was everywhere. It stunk because everything was unsettled and it was a massive eyesore. There was no way for me to fix it by the time the lease ended because the grass would still look like crap. I got some photos and sent it through to the REA, letting them know the grass was cut. After one furious phone call with me re-explaining the whole situation, I've never been pushed to mow grass while the ground is wet. For those not from Australia, real estate or real estate agent equals landlord. And our second story. Never leave a spill? You got it. Quite some time ago, I used to work at Walmart, and honestly, it was by far the worst job I've ever had. I could go on for hours about all the horror stories I have from that place. One story in particular I feel is a good fit here. You see, the store I worked in had a rule that if you see a spill, you're to guard the area to keep customers from slipping and falling. You were not to leave the spill for any reason while you flagged down another employee so they could fetch cleaning supplies. Only managers and the cleaning crew had radios. I understand the logic here, as a lawsuit would certainly cost much more than an hourly employee's time standing next to a spill until it was cleaned up. However, there are a few issues with this in practice. I worked the evening shift in the meat department, and most days I was the only person in my department. I was situated between frozen foods and produce, which more often than not had only one-person shifts as well, but they're closed much earlier than my department. This meant that I was the only person in my corner of the store for about half of my shift. If I came across a spill, there was no telling how long I'd have to wait around for another employee to come by, because there was literally nobody else working in or around my area. Also, being in the meat department, we had multiple cleaning stations all around. One was always a few steps away. One day, while working alone, I noticed a small spill. So I stood next to it per procedure for about 10 minutes. In this time, nobody, customer nor coworker, even entered my view. I couldn't help but think how dumb this was, as I could see a cleaning station just on the other side of a bunker. I decided to throw in the flag and just go get the cleaning supplies and take care of it myself, because even if a customer did come around, I could still see the spill and easily call out to them to watch their step. Unsurprisingly, I was able to make the round trip without any incidents. As I was cleaning it, a manager came walking up and took notice of me. Manager: "What happened here?" Me: "Just a spill. I've got it all sorted." Manager: Did you just happen to have cleaning supplies with you? Me. No, but they were just right there. I was able to fetch them without losing sight of the spill. Manager. That's not how we do things. Someone could have gotten hurt. Me. No, as I could have called to anyone that came near it. I was never more than a few steps away. Manager. Doesn't matter. You should have stood next to the spill and waited for someone else to come by. This went on for a few minutes, but the manager was not budging, so I conceded. That was not good enough for him, as he then proceeded to write me up for negligence and unsafe work practices. I was livid, but I was also a college student and needed the job, so I just kept quiet and returned to my shift. A week or two later, as I was once again the only person working in my corner of the store, I happened upon another spill. This time I shrugged and decided to guard it as if my job depended on it. I checked my watch and noticed that I had about 3 hours left on my shift and had a small laugh as the thought that I might be standing in that spot guarding a puddle instead of closing my department. 10 minutes passed, 30 minutes passed, 1 hour passed. Around this time I was bored out of my mind, but then I heard a call over the intercom system that made it so much more worth it. We need an associate from the meat department to the back for a truck. This was followed by a few other calls for other departments for their trucks arriving as well. I started laughing out loud at this because I knew that this meant that the very few people that were likely to come by my department were now at the loading dock unloading trucks while I stood guard over my puddle. A few minutes passed before I heard the second call. We need an associate from the meat department to the back for a truck. I just stood there counting the lights on the ceiling. 1 hour left on my shift, and there still had not been a single fellow employee walk by. I assumed everyone was starting to finish up their own trucks by this point and would likely soon have to start unloading my truck as well. I was watching the minutes go by in anticipation, trying to decide if someone would come find me before my shift ended or not. I finally got my answer 15 minutes before the end of my shift as the very same manager from before came storming through the meat department, furious. We made eye contact and he stormed over to me and started yelling about how they've been calling for me to unload the truck and how they are now behind schedule and so on. Once he took a breath long enough for me to speak, I asked simply, "Can you go to the spill station and grab something to clean this up? I've been here for a while now." He glanced down at the puddle next to me, and I thought he was going to explode. Manager: "You mean to tell me that you didn't unload the truck because you were watching a spill?" Me: "Yes." Manager: "Why didn't you just clean it up?" Me: "But leaving the spill would be unsafe for any customers. Besides, you wrote me up for doing that very thing recently, right?" The manager tossed his hands up in defeat and walked 15 steps away to the nearest spill station and returned with supplies that he promptly gave me to clean the spill myself. Manager: "Once you're done, go back to the loading dock and start on your truck." Me: "Sorry, I have only about 10 minutes left on my shift, and as I've been standing here guarding the spill, I never got my second break, so I'm going to the break room for a bit before clocking out. You'll need to find someone to close down my department as well." At this, the manager just stomped off in a rage. I cleaned up the spill, played on my phone in the break room for a bit, and clocked out with a smile on my face. I know that the manager just made someone else do all the work and wasn't personally affected by this, but knowing that I could be a thorn in his side was enough for me. I feel like your security people must be as dumb as your manager if they watched you stand in one place for hours on cameras. And our last story. My aunt tries to kick my grandma out of her house and take the property. The main characters: Aunt Karen, my grandma, my grandpa. So this started last summer. I was living out of town at the time, but about to move back home. I was going to move to the property, so definitely have a personal stake in what goes on there. My grandma's talking about how my grandpa has been working on the guest house I'd be moving into. A little backstory. Her property is 12 acres out in central Texas, hilly but close to a couple major cities, so very, very valuable. Aunt Karen was at the time mostly out of the family loop due to some earlier unrelated drama a couple years back. She shows up one day with her husband in tow looking to help out. She and my grandma haven't been on the best terms, but knowing that Aunt Karen has experience with houses and her husband with construction, she lets them into helping with fixing up the house. This was Aunt Karen's in. Almost immediately, she started speaking to my grandpa in private, saying all sorts of stuff. She told him that my grandma was a drunk, going crazy in her old age, she's 80, and that he should kick her out. Unfortunately, him being 85 and somewhat impressionable, actually listened and started to kick my grandma out. My grandma actually packed her bags and was leaving for a hotel the next town over before he ran out and started apologizing. She left for a few days and came back. Now, you may be wondering why Aunt Karen was doing this. Her reasoning was that she wanted to cause a divorce. The divorce would lead to so much money being spent on both sides that my grandpa would have to give up the house and she would be able to, 1, live in the nice house out in the country worth a decent bit of cash, and 2, move her son into the guest house. The guest house that was specifically being fixed for me when I came back to town after a few years away. Of course, she wasn't assuming that my grandma and my grandpa, having been married for 50 years, would be able to fix their disputes rather quickly. She also didn't assume that both her 2 sisters, as well as the 3 half-siblings on my grandpa's side, would find out. Almost immediately after finding out about what Karen did, her husband and son ratted out Aunt Karen's plans to the whole family, a large, very close-knit family. You can assume the deep crap that Aunt Karen was in. As of now, Aunt Karen's no longer on speaking terms with her oldest and youngest, the middle 2 already had been mostly staying away from her, nor basically anyone else on my side of the family. Her husband no longer lives with her, and she escaped to a nursing job 2 states over. My grandma and I are going to the wedding of Aunt Karen's second youngest in a couple weeks, where she'll also be attending. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.